14. This is very kind of you. The prince went to dress for the occasion, for he was resolved to die like a prince. When the princess heard that a man had offered to die for her, she was so transported that she jumped off the bed, feeble as she was, and danced about the room for joy. She did not care who the man was. That was nothing to her. The hole wanted stopping, and if only a man would do, why, take one. In an hour or two, everything was ready. Her maid dressed her in haste, and they carried her to the side of the lake. When she saw it, she shrieked and covered her face with her hands. They bore her across to the stone, where they had already placed a little boat for her. The water was not deep enough to float in it, but they hoped it would be before long. They laid her on cushions, placed in the boats wines and fruits and other nice things, and stretched a canopy over all. In a few minutes the prince appeared. The princess recognized him at once, but did not think it was worth while to acknowledge him. "Here I am," said the prince. "Put me in." "They told me it was a shoe black," said the princess. "So am I," said the prince. "I blacken your little boots 3 times a day, because they were all I could get of you. Put me in." The courtiers did not resent his bluntness, except by saying to each other that he was taking it out in prudence. But how was he to be put in? The gold plate contained no instructions on this point. The prince looked at the hole and saw but one way. He put both his legs into it, sitting on the stone, and, stooping forward, covered the corner that remained open with his 2 hands. In this uncomfortable position, he resolved to abide his faith, and turning to the people, he said, "Now you can go." The king had already gone home to dinner. "Now you can go," repeated the princess after him, like a parrot. The people obeyed her and went. Presently a little wave flowed under the stone, and wetted one of the prince's knees, but he did not mind it much. He began to sing, and the song he sang was this: "As a world that has no well, darting bright into forest dell, of the downward going stream, as a world without the glance of the ocean's fair expanse, as a world where never rain glittered on the sunny plain, such, my heart, thy world would be, if no love did flow in thee. As a world without the sound of the rivets underground, or the bubbling of the spring out of darkness wandering, or the mighty rush and flowing of the rivers downward going, or the music showers that drop on the outspread breach's top, or the ocean's mighty voice, when the lifted waves rejoice, such my soul thy world would be, if no love did sing in thee. Lady, keep thy world's delight, keep the waters in thy sight. Love hath made me strong to go, for thy sake to realms below, where the waters shine and hum, to the darkness never come. Let, I pray, one thought of me spring a little well in thee, lest thy loveless soul be found like a dry and thirsty ground." "Sing again, prince. It makes it less tedious," said the princess. But the prince was too much overjoyed to sing any more, and a long pause followed. "This is very nice of you, prince," said the princess at last, coolly, as she lay in the boat with her eyes shut. "I'm sorry I can't return the compliment," thought the prince, "but you are worth dying for, after all." Again a wavelet, and another flowed over the stone and wetted both the prince's knees, but he did not speak or move. 2, 3, 4 hours passed in this way, the princess apparently asleep, and the prince very patient. But he was much disappointed in his position, for he had none of the consolation he had hoped for. At last he could bear it no longer. "Princess," said he. But at the moment started up the princess, crying, "I'm afloat! I'm afloat!" And the little boat bumped against the stone. "Princess!" repeated the prince, encouraged by seeing her wide awake and looking eagerly into the water. "Well?" said she, without looking around. "Your papa promised that you should look at me, and you haven't looked at me once." "Did he? Then I suppose I must. But I'm so sleepy." "Sleep then, darling, and don't mind me," said the poor prince. Really, you are very good, replied the princess. I think I will go to sleep again. Just give me a glass of wine and a biscuit first, said the prince, very humbly. With all my heart, said the princess, and gaped as she said it. She got the wine and the biscuit, however, and leaning over the side of the boat towards him, was compelled to look at him. My prince, she said, you don't look well. Are you sure you don't mind it? Not a bit, he answered, feeling very faint indeed. Only I shall die before it is of any use to you, unless I have something to eat. There then, she said, holding out the wine to him. Ah, you must feed me. I dare not move my hands. The water would run away directly. Good gracious, said the princess, and she began at once to feed him with bits of biscuits and sips of wine. As she fed him, he contrived to kiss the tips of her fingers now and then. She did not seem to mind it, one way or the other, but the prince felt better. Now, for your sake, princess, he said, I cannot let you go to sleep. You must sit and look at me. Well, I will do anything I can do to oblige you, answered she with condescension, and, sitting down, she did look at him, and kept looking at him with wonderful steadiness, considering all things. The sun went down and the moon rose, and gush after gush the waters were rising up the prince's body. They were up to his waist now. Why can't we go and have a swim, said the princess. There seems to be water enough just about here. I shall never swim more, said the prince. Oh, I forgot, said the princess, and was silent. So the water grew, and rose up and up on the prince, and the princess sat and looked at him. She fed him now and then. The night wore on. The waters rose and rose. The moon rose likewise higher and higher, and shone full on the face of the dying prince. The water was up to his neck. Will you kiss me, princess? He said feebly. The nonchalant was all gone now. Yes, I will, answered the princess, and kissed him with a long, sweet, cold kiss. Now, said he, with a sigh of content, I die happy. He did not speak again. The princess gave him some wine for the last time, while he was past eating. Then she sat down again and looked at him. The water rose and rose. It touched his chin. It touched his lower lip. It touched between his lips. He shut them hard to keep it out. The princess began to feel strange. It touched his upper lip. He breathed through his nostrils. The princess looked wild. It covered his nostrils. Her eyes looked scared and shone strange things in the moonlight. His head fell back, and the water closed over it, and the bubbles of his last breath bubbled up through the water. The princess gave a shriek and sprang into the lake. She laid hold first of one leg and then the other, and pulled one and tugged, but she could not move either. She stopped to take a breath, and that made her think that he could not get any breath. She was frantic. She got a hold of him and got his head above water, which was possible now, but his hands were no longer on the hole. But it was of no use, for he was past breathing. Love and water brought back all of her strength. She got under the water and pulled with her whole might, till at last she got one leg out. The other easily followed. How she got him into the boat she never could tell, but when she did, she fainted away. Coming to herself, she seized the oars, kept herself steady as best as she could, and rowed, though she had never rowed before. Around rocks and over shallows through the mud she rowed, till she got to the landing stairs of the palace. By this time her people were on the shore, for they had heard her shriek. They made them carry the prince to her own room, and lay him in her bed, and light a fire, and send for the doctors. But the lake, your highness, said the chamberlain, who, aroused by the noise, came in his nightcap. Go drown yourself in it, said she. This was the last rudeness of which the princess was ever guilty, and one must allow that she had a good cause to feel provoked with the Lord Chamberlain. Had it been the king himself, he would have fared no better. But both he and the queen were fast asleep, and the chamberlain went back to his bed. Somehow, the doctors never came. So the princess and her old nurse were left with the prince. But the old nurse was a wise woman and knew what to do. They tried everything for a long time without success. The princess was nearly distracted between hope and fear. But she tried on, one thing after another, and everything over and over again. At last, when they had all but given it up, just as the sun rose, the prince opened his eyes. 15. Look at the rain. The princess burst into a passion of tears and fell on the floor. There she lay for an hour, and her tears never ceased. All the pent-up crying of her life was now spent up, and a rain came on, such as had never been seen in that country. The sun shone all the time, and the great drops which fell to the earth shone likewise. The palace was now in the heart of a rainbow. It was a rain of rubies and sapphires and emeralds and topazes. The torrents poured from the mountains like molten gold, and if it had not been for its subterraneous outlet, the lake would have overflown and inundated the country. It was full from shore to shore. But the princess did not heed the lake. She lay on the floor and wept, and this rain within doors was far more wonderful than the rain out of doors. For when it abated a little, she proceeded to rise. She found, to her astonishment, she could not. At length, after many efforts, she succeeded in getting upon her feet. She tumbled down again directly. Hearing her fall, her old nurse uttered a yell of delight and ran to her, screaming, "My darling child! She's found her gravity." "Oh, that's it, is it?" said the princess, rubbing her shoulder and knee alternatively. "I consider it very unpleasant. I feel as if I should be crushed to pieces." "Hurrah!" cried the prince from the bed. "If you come around, princess, so have I." "How's the lake?" "Brimful," answered the nurse. "Then we're all happy." "That we are, indeed," answered the princess, sobbing. And there was rejoicing all over the country that rainy day. Even the babies forgot their past troubles and danced and crowded amazingly. And the king told stories, and the queen listened to them. He divided the money in his box, and she the honey in her pot, along all the children. There was such jubilation as was never heard of before. Of course, the prince and princess were betrothed at once, but the princess had to learn to walk before they could be married without any propriety. And this was not so easy at her time of life, for she could walk no more than a baby. She was always falling down and hurting herself. "Gravity used to make so much fun of," she said one day to the prince, as he raised her from the floor. "For my part, I was a great deal more comfortable without it." No, that's not it. This is it," replied the prince, as he took her up and carried her like a baby, kissing her all the time. "This is gravity." "That's better," said she. "I don't mind that so much." And she smiled the sweetest, loveliest smile on the prince's face, and she gave him one little kiss in return for all his, and he thought them overpaid, for he was beside himself with delight. I fear she complained of her gravity more than once after this, notwithstanding. It was a long time before she got reconciled to walking, but the pain of learning it was quite counterbalanced by two things, either of which would have been sufficient consolation. The first was that the prince himself was her teacher, and second, that she could tumble into the lake as often as she pleased. Still, she preferred to have the prince jump in with her, and the splash they made before was nothing to the splash they made now. The lake never sank again. In the process of time, it wore the roof of the cavern quite through, and was twice as deep as before. The only revenge the princess took upon her aunt was to tread pretty hard on her gouty toe the next time she saw her. But she was sorry for it the very next day, when she heard that the water had undermined her house, and that it had fallen in the night, burying her in its ruins. whence no one ever ventured to dig up her body. There she lies to this day. So the prince and princess lived and were happy. And they had crowns of gold, and clothes of cloth, and shoes of leather, and children, boys and girls, not one of whom was ever known, on the most critical occasion, to lose the smallest atom of his or her due proportion of gravity. The end. I'm always amazed at how much these old tales still resonate hundreds of years later, even if the story doesn't have any cows. I guess we'll forgive it for that. I hope you enjoyed listening to this audiobook. Don't forget to check out lookingforcows.com to see what's coming up next. Until then, good luck looking for cows out there.